Hi, my name is Nigel Griffiths. I work in IBM Power Systems Advanced Technical Support in Europe. In this Systems Director on AIX and Power 7 movie, we're going to look at which bits save me time. But first, a story about how this movie came about. I was recently in a large internal conference at Austin, Texas, which is the home of AIX and Power, and I presented a 2-hour session on Director to the 300 top techies in the world. And when I'd finished, they were saying to me, "Nigel, you seem to actually like Systems Director." And I said, well, it just saves me time. It's changed from it's my job to use it and encourage customers to I actually use it for my own benefits to save me time. So they asked me to create a movie explaining which bits I actually like because they save me time. First of all, with Systems Director 6.2 and onwards, the install time has been drastically reduced. It's under an hour for installing Director on a new copy of AIX and including the 3 favorite plugins: Active Energy Manager, WPAR Manager and VM Control. Now I'm not going to go into details here. There are other movies. The install movie is only 9 minutes long, and for the other plugins there's just a couple of minutes to explain how to install each of those. And you can go and find those movies at this website. Number 2 is the Update Manager. I'm in control of a number of HMCs, loads of machines, Power 5, 6 and 7, and lots of copies of AIX. And so I use the Update Manager for keeping these up to date. Now, to be quite honest, some of my older HMCs and the older firmware on the machines was getting a bit out of date because I find it difficult to find the time, and then every time I do it, it was 2 years since I last did it, and I have to remember how to actually do the updating. Now though, it's a 4-click upgrade. With Update Manager, I tell it what I'm interested in, and it goes every night, because I've scheduled it, to go and see what's the latest things that I'm interested in that is available. I can then click on the Show Known Updates. In this case, I'm selected AIX 6.1 TL4, and look, last night it discovered that 3 days ago there is a new Service Pack 6. So I click on that, click on the Install button, I select the machine I want to do the upgrade to. It says, do you want to have the prerequisites done? Well, of course I do. Do I want to automatically reboot? Or I can do that later if I want to. Yes, yes. We click Finish and we are done. This is the same process for HMCs and the firmware on the machines as well. This saves me a great deal of time. Number 3 is this whole machine performance view. Which LPAR on my machine is taking up my CPU time? Well, I've captured this screen dump earlier on today, and we can see over here this is the machine, and then these are all the logical partitions on it. This is a different machine in here. This is actually the one running Systems Director. We can see 2 LPARs here taking 250% of the CPU. So what does that actually mean? Well, 100% is entitlement. So when you go over entitlement, we're uncapped, we're going up to higher numbers. But be careful, this is 250% of what? And that is this number of CPUs over here, 2 CPUs in this case and 4 in here. So rather than using these utilization numbers that can be very misleading, as you can see here, we should use this utilization number over here. This is the CPU actually used. The top one is 1 CPU and the bottom one's taking nearly 4 CPUs. So we can see that Diamond 8 logical partition is taking up nearly half of the machine. This is the one we need to watch carefully. Number 4 is direct drill up of the HMC function. So I've used Navigator here to find my Diamond 8 server. I'm then going to click on it and I get this extended management, and if you look at this list of things in here, if you've been using a HMC recently, you'll realize that those are HMC functions, and so we can do things like activate and start and stop our logical partition, we can manage the configuration, and we can do things like dynamic logical partition changes. Maybe you want to change the amount of processor time on this logical partition. That saves me time because I don't have to remember this logical partition could be moving between machines, so I don't have to work out which machine it's on, and then the HMC that is connected to, I don't have to log onto the HMC, find the logical partition, and then do the operation. I can do it straight from Systems Director. Number 5 then is Active Energy Manager, or AME as we say for short. Very simple to activate, even simpler to monitor. And this can, with Power 6 for example, save electricity, which is good for the planet but also saves money. In Power 7 we can actually go in for overclocking as well, so that makes me look like a performance genius. When I switch this feature on, I can get the machine running 9 to 10% faster. With the navigator, I've found my machine, I've clicked on it, I've gone to energy, then I've gone to power management and gone to power savings. I click on here for dynamic power savings, favor performance. This is the option that says when it's idle, save electricity, when it's busy, overclock the CPU. Then we go down the same menu system and we now take trend data. Over here we can see this is when we switched it on, so we saved some electricity. But then I produced a workload that hammered the machine, and we can see we've gone down 50 watts, but then we've gone up 190 watts when we're actually running full power on this machine. The drop in watts is actually not too much because the Power 7 chip already saves electricity as it runs by switching off internal units and things. And this is only an 8-way machine. If I was a bigger configuration in the same machine, then the drop will be greater because we get more CPUs that we can go into power saving mode. Over here in the brown line we have the gigahertz rating, so 100% is the rating of what we actually supply the machine at. In this case it was 3.55 gigahertz, and when we switched on the power saving it dropped the gigahertz rating down to 1.65. But then when we ramped up the workload, it overclocked by 9%, and we actually then get to 3.86 gigahertz. This is a really cheap way of getting your machines to run faster. And we move on to number 6. This is VM Control, the Image Manager. This allows us to capture what's known as a virtual appliance, and in power terms this is a makesysB on a NIM server and the configuration of that original logical partition. And then we can deploy this virtual appliance again and again and again in a very simple manner. So how do we actually do that? On the capture side, we go to the VM control panel and hit capture. We then give it a name and some details that we want to remember about what's actually in this logical partition. Perhaps we've got applications already set up. Then we say which server do we actually want to capture. Here we've selected Daemon 4, and then it's done. It will take 20 minutes or so. It will capture all that information from the HMC and the VIO server for the disks and the network. Then it will actually do this makesysB back into the repository, which in our case is in NIM. Then we can do deployment. So we hit the deployment option. It says which appliance do you want to deploy. It says which machine do you want it to be deployed on. And then we have to supply some details like the new host name we want and the new IP address we want and some routing information. And then we click finish and it goes off and does it. So we can deploy the same virtual appliance many times and create lots of logical partitions in a very easy way. At number 7, to save me time, I use quite a lot of workload partitions, and I use the Workload Partition Manager plugin to do that. Now let's confess, when I create a workload partition I tend to use a script. That's because there's lots and lots of parameters that you need to supply to create a workload partition, and it's easier to take the script I used last time, make a few changes to IP addresses and host names and things, and then rerun that script. But from then on I use the Workload Partition Manager for absolutely everything, controlling my workload partitions. There's a brand new feature for WPARs where we can run AIX 5.2 in a versioned WPAR, a really cool feature, and I think this is going to be very important in the future. So here's the panel for the Workload Partitions Manager. We can see which machines are actually involved and the workload partitions. Here's a typical screen where we have this is the machine and these are all the workload partitions on it and more down below. And I can start and stop, I can change, I can back up my workload partitions, and I can do live application mobility with it as well, all from a graphical user interface to easily understand where all my workload partitions are and what they're doing. This versioned WPAR is a new feature. This is the actual script I used to create them, where it's pulling in an AIX 5.2 makesysB and putting that into the workload partition as it goes. And then we have AIX 5.2 running on top of AIX 7 and benefiting from all those powerful features and functions that we get with our Power 7 servers. And we get to number 8, which is my automation plans. This is what I call pure systems management function. With an automation plan, we can set a threshold, for example, a file system getting below a certain amount of megabytes free. We can decide the resource that I'll apply it to, and then the target, which machine it's actually going to run on. And when that event actually happens, it's automatically flagged in Systems Director, so we can see it coming up on a panel. There's something wrong here, there's a warning or an error. But then we can decide that we want to do things like send emails, so it will be flagged to me as a systems administrator, so I can go and handle it. If you prefer, a text message to your mobile phone, or you can ask a shell script to be taken some action on the machine to actually go and fix the problem, and that makes a great deal of sense to me. Now here we have the thresholds being set up from right to left. You can see when it gets below the 64 in the middle megabytes in the /temp file system on the RED 2 machine, and we got the similar thresholds set up for the RED 2 and RED 3 and the various file systems involved. Then we're going to decide that when this combination happens, this event on this machine, there's actually going to run an action. In this case, it's going to run a event action called temp increase, and here's the definition of that. So we can see a description, then it's going to run user bin temp increase, and it's going to supply it a whole bunch of parameters. There's about 20 different parameters, all the information the Systems Director has about this machine, this event, this time, and that can be supplied to the script. My temp increase script just uses the change file system command to add 1/4 gigabyte into the file system involved. Of course, we should be using this to make life easier for ourselves, shouldn't we? So when the first event happens, we should say, okay, let's start monitoring this with Systems Director and apply that to all the file systems on all our important machines, for example. When it happens again, perhaps we want to think about having an automated response, so that when the file system fills up, in this example, then we can do something about it, making the file system bigger if it's not already at some maximum size. And when it happens a third time, all we have to do is decide where we want to go for lunch. Because Systems Director will tell us the event happened, it will go and fix it, and then tell us that it's fixed it, so we don't have to do anything at all. So these are the bits that save me time, and I could probably come up with half a dozen more if I applied myself. But these, I think, are the important ones. If you're not watching this in 1024 by 768 pixel resolution, then the original larger movie can be found at this website. Now, I hope you found that interesting. If I'm saving time, probably you could save some time and some electricity, do some fancy overclocking, and look really cool too.